Okay, welcome, my friends, to another one of my episodes here, the Red Delta Project podcast, live feed Q&A, where we are making fitness easier by taking a fundamental approach to diet and exercise. I'm Matt Schifferly of the Red Delta Project, and this week's episode is sponsored by the entirety of the RDP library, including the new Quick Read PDF series, which are all linked down below. These are simple little PDF ebooks that are only about 20, sometimes maybe 30 pages in length, but they have a very simple, straight to the point message that can make a very big difference along your training journey. And I'm going to be referencing several of them in today's episode, so check out the links down below, and that'll get you to the RDP merch store where you can download them on a PDF. It's not even going through Amazon. So today's topic is all about 6 ways that I find too many people are leaving gains on the table. It's very easy to overthink and overcomplicate trying to make some sort of progress when it comes to building muscle and strength. And as a result, we often get lost in the weeds where it's like, okay, so what about split body training versus full body training? Or if I do splits, is upper lower split better, or push pull split? Or how many types of splits, or should I do cardio first? And we basically get lost in the minutia. There's a lot of messages out there in our fitness culture that encourage us to major in minor things. Meanwhile, the big things that are really important, that are easiest to tackle, are often getting completely ignored. And that's what we're talking about today, is 6 different ways that I find that people are ignoring these big fundamental concepts that are a lot easier for building muscle and strength. And they're just kind of, yeah, whatever. I don't need to pay attention to that, or they're not even aware of it. And meanwhile, they're putting all of their attention into these things that are far more difficult, much more complicated, and honestly, probably not all that important. So let's jump into number 1. Number 1 is what I like to call dirty programming. And dirty programming basically refers to using workouts that are programmed in such a way that are going after so many different variables, but you're not really honing in on the basic things that are best for building muscle and strength. And yes, of course, you can certainly build muscle and strength with almost anything, depending on your level of conditioning. I mean, hell, if you were in outer space on the International Space Station for a while and your muscles had significantly atrophied, if you came back down to just Earth's gravity, you would probably find that your muscles and your legs would get bigger just walking around, because you're subjecting them to a progressive stimulus just doing anything at all. But for most people, especially those who are not new to the exercise scene, it's going to take a lot more than that, because the more you gain, the more you're going to have to progressively do lots more in order to keep those things going. That's why gains are progressively harder. My cat is meowing here for letting out. And that's why it's always so much harder. The more you build, the harder it is to build every subsequent pound or even gram of muscle. So when we're looking at our programming, oftentimes the stuff that gets thrown in there in the name of functional fitness or athleticism and 100 other little reasons why we may have it can be good for those applications. But at the end of the day, if your goal is to build muscle and strength, you want to focus on very simple, basic, technically easy types of exercises that are going to really challenge your muscular work capacity, meaning strength and or endurance, a combination of the two, to essentially just focus on, I just want to make my muscles work like crazy. I want to make my muscles work really, really hard. And the cardio and the skills and the coordination and the athleticism and stuff, that's good, but it's not a very direct approach for creating that stimulus for actually building that muscle. So if you kind of want an example of this, essentially, you want to train like a bodybuilder. You want to train like a power lifter. You want to train like somebody who's in the gym or at home doing very basic exercises. Yes, Gregorius coming in, push-ups, very simple things that are going to make it really easy to push your muscular work capacity. Now, programming that's kind of diluted and it's got a lot of other stuff in there is just going to make it harder to do that, because you're expending your time and your energy doing just, well, other things. Imagine if you were in, let's say, a pottery class, and the teacher was like, great, we're going to learn how to make pottery. We're going to make, the conventional ashtrays, as it were. But we're also going to work on basket weaving, and learning SOS. And we're also going to have shortwave radio. And we're also going to read tea leaves for everybody's fortune in the same hour. Well, that's a lot of activities. And yeah, a lot of it can be kind of cool and stuff. But if all you wanted to do was get in there and make an ashtray, all that stuff is just going to distract you. So look at your programming. Look at what you're throwing in there. By all means, throw other things in there. The foam rolling, put 500, 1,000 meters on the rowing machine, do some jump ropes, add some stuff here and there. I'm not saying you have to exclusively be doing like bodybuilder training or anything, but I'm saying that if you've got, I hear I should be doing this animal flow, and I should be doing kettlebells, and I should be doing this functional stuff, and I should be doing this stability training, I should be all this other things. Before you know it, all of the very basic exercises and methods that are more direct about working those muscles kind of get squeezed out. And then you've got this workout that doesn't really do a whole heck of a lot for actually building muscle. I think it was in Pumping Iron, Arnold Schwarzenegger basically put it very simply. He was like, dude, if you want to build bigger, stronger glutes, work your glutes. If you want bigger biceps, work your biceps. It's very straightforward, but we can get so distracted by a lot of the noise out there, especially in our fitness culture now, where we've got social media and everybody's trying to tell us you've got to be doing all this other stuff because it's important to them, but not necessarily important to you. Because always remember that every influencer out there, myself included, we always like to put a lot of emphasis on the things that we feel are important, the things that we think are best. It's your job to be able to look at all that stuff and say, yeah, I know you think it's really important that I can have really super hypermobile hips and do animal flows and stuff. But to be honest with you, I just don't care. And if it's not important to you, it's simply not that important. It's that simple. So be focused on keeping your programming very simple and direct towards challenging your muscular work capacity. Because if it's not, you're making the whole process harder. And if you can get it more like that, you're going to be picking up a lot more of those proverbial gains that you're leaving on the table. All right. Thanks you very much, people coming on in on the live feed. Always remember, everybody, that if you put a "Hey Matt" in the subject line, I know it's something that is directed at me, but nonetheless, let's see what some folks are saying in the RDP community. Jack Evans saying, my dilemma is wanting to learn all the skills while looking like a bodybuilder head to toe. I know what you mean, my friend, because there's so much cool stuff out there. It's like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet. You just want everything on the buffet. It's like I have no discernment. But inevitably, you have to make trade-offs. Andy over at GMB Fitness, he had a great quote in the latest edition of the GMB Fitness podcast, where he said, fitness is all about making compromises with your personal limits. Where he's basically like, okay, what limitations do I have in my life? What limits do I have with my body? What limits do I have in my schedule and everything? And how am I going to get what I want with that? Well, maybe you can, but maybe you can't. As the saying goes, you can have anything you want. You just can't have everything at once. And that's why a lot of people will go through phases in their training careers. Be like, yeah, I had the bodybuilding phase when I was in my 20s and early 30s. It was all about making gains and stuff. But then after that, I kind of beat my body up a little bit. And I started to get really into, the calisthenics skills and learning cool animal flows and things like that. It's perfectly fine to go in phases like that. One of my best friends, he's out here in Colorado. He was so hardcore into BJJ and martial arts for years. And now if you talk to him, you're like, how much are you doing? He's like, I don't even know if he's practicing anymore. Probably is. I have a hard time believing he would give it up, but he is all in on pickleball. He is crazy about pickle. He does these weekend-long tournaments and everything. It's just phases. We have different phases that go for different types of areas of our lives. They serve a purpose, usually for several years. And then it's like, great, I got kind of what I need out of it, or as much as I can out of it. Now I'm going to go into this other phase of things. There's a lot of great things we can explore. There's no reason why you should only prioritize one type of training or one type of objective for the entirety of your life. Things are always going to be important, but it doesn't need to be that way all the time. Anyway, I'm kind of getting a little rambled on. That cat is saying, hey, Matt, you're the best. Thank you very much. I know. No, totally not humble. Will you ever be making a video on insulin resistance and or eating lower carbs? Oh, very good. So there's actually a really good book I'm going to refer to you to instead that did a hell of a lot better job than I would ever do, called Strong Medicine. Marty Gallagher and Dr. blanking on the name right now. I know I should definitely know this because I always refer to people on this, because the premise of the book is that trying to control sugar levels in the body is a very good component to our health and our performance and stuff. And they were very clear, and I love this perspective of the book. And they were saying, sugar can be a very big problematic thing if we're eating too much of it, if we're having trouble burning enough of it in the body and stuff. But they were also very clear in saying that low carb is not necessarily the way to go for everybody, that it's not always the solution. And when we look at it fundamentally, it makes total sense, because the fundamental process of everything about nutrition is consumption versus expenditure. And a lot of times insulin resistance is due to the fact of we've been consuming so much of it, but not able to utilize it. But it is a lot more murky as well, because there are people who develop diabetes who are not overweight, who do not eat too many carbs, who do not eat a lot of sugar. There's a lot of influences to it besides just how much sugar are you eating. Hell, if that was the reason for insulin resistance, I would have developed that easily in college, because I think my diet was about 50% pure sugar at that point. And I think it's there's a lot more to it. But nonetheless, you'll get a lot of rhetoric out there from people like, oh, carbs are the enemy, sugar's the enemy. It's like, no, you don't understand how sugar actually works. Carbs actually work in the body. Same thing with insulin resistance. Some people can be more susceptible to it than others for various reasons. But yeah, I should probably make a video on it. You're talking to me. But anyway, Strong Medicine. Read that book. That's going to give you a lot better information than I would ever give you. Craig Thomas saying, I put a dip bar in the office and doing incidental dips, knee raises, L sits. Awesome. Inverted rows, 9 to 5. It took me by surprise how easy it has worked, and actually getting paid to do it, because you're doing it on the job. Amen, my brother. Amen. I like that attitude. That's fantastic. Very good. Yeah, I think there's this idea that exercise needs to happen under a very particular set of conditions to be effective. Like, we've got to be like, okay, life, time out. Life, work, family, job, everybody, holding pattern. I got to go to the gym, and I got to spend this time, and I got to have this program. The fact of the matter is, when you understand how fitness works fundamentally, everything creates a stimulus. I've got my dip bars right here, and I get a dip, and there we go. Okay, very good. That didn't look like much, but it did do something. It did create some little bit of a stimulus. I guarantee it. So all we need to do is something at all to create a stimulus. It's not like it only counts under special circumstances or a certain set of circumstances, and then it counts. Because, and I've addressed this in the past episodes, if we think it only counts under certain circumstances, then we're not going to do anything else, which leaves gains on the table. And we're going to abide by those conditions. Like, let's say I need to do 3 sets of 12 on the dips in order for it to count. Well, maybe that's not enough. Maybe I need more than that. Maybe I need to do different exercise. Maybe that's not going to be sufficient. But in my mind, I'm telling myself, well, I got my 3 sets of 12. So therefore, that workout counts, mission accomplished, and I can go along my happy way, thinking I've effectively created the stimulus I need, when in reality, you kind of didn't. Well, you did create a stimulus, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Let's get into the second point now of things that are causing you to leave gains on the table. As I drink my tea, we talk about number 2, too much restrictive dieting. Restrictive dieting is one of those things that is pervasive within our fitness culture, largely because the vast majority of people who come to fitness are looking to either eat healthier or lose weight. Okay, now, in healthier, a lot of times that means eating better foods, more nutrient-dense foods, and not eating too much of the junk food. Lots of times that means less of the junk food. And when it comes to losing the weight, again, we're talking about not eating too much of the junk food and making sure you're not consuming excess calories for reasons too much outside of supporting your physical health. Things like emotional eating or negative emotional eating, I call it. And, eating too much when you're stressed and you're bored, and happy hours and all these other sorts of things. So that's why a lot of the advice out there in our fitness culture about how you should eat, quote, healthy, is all about restricting you down. We just talked about this with carbohydrates. A lot of times if people are coming to the table and they're saying, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm overweight. My blood sugar's all crazy and stuff. Chances are they're eating an excessive amount of sugar and carbohydrates. Not always, but chances are. So of course they're going to fall into the low carb groups and why keto is the best thing in the world and why sugar is the devil and everything like that. Not recognizing, no, it's not bad. It's just bad for you because you've got too much of it. It's like someone with a peanut allergy telling everyone that peanuts are bad and unhealthy. It's like, no, your condition and your circumstances are making it bad. It's fine for everybody else. Know what context to apply these sorts of things. But nonetheless, when people are often getting into fitness and they're like, I'm going to lift weights and I'm going to start doing pull-ups and calisthenics, I'm going to build some muscle, I should look at diet too, shouldn't I? Okay, so what do I do for diet advice? And then you get all of that stuff of never eat sugar, low carb is the best, don't eat red meat, don't eat processed foods, clean eating all the time, on and on and on and on. But we lose track of the purpose of true healthy eating when we do this. Because a truly healthy diet is one that supports and supplies you with the necessary things in order to be as healthy and happy as possible. And that goes beyond nutrients and calories. That also goes for emotional support from food and hedonistic support of food. There's a lot of things that we get from food. And when we don't get enough, that compromises our mind, our body, our quality of life, but it can also compromise your gains. Because yes, you do need to eat enough. You do need to eat enough to support your training. And that's not for building muscle specifically, that's just anything. That's any type of physical activity. When I was in college and I became a bike racer, people were like, you better eat enough. You better make sure you're eating well and you're eating enough because you're training your butt off and burning thousands of calories in a single bike race. So you've got to make sure you're eating enough to support your bike racing. And building muscle and working out in the gym is the same way. Now, you're not burning nearly as many calories doing a pull-up back and bicep session as you are during a bike race, but nonetheless, you want to make sure that you are eating enough. And it's just simply harder to do when the basis of your dietary approach is I don't eat carbs and I don't eat red meat and I don't eat processed foods and I don't eat anything that has the color yellow on the package and I don't eat anything that didn't exist 10,000 years ago, and rules on and on and on, all about restriction. So always remember, you're eating to support yourself. You're eating to satisfy, as we use here at the Red Delta Project. Yes, that 9 times out of 10, that means eat plenty of whole foods, nutrient-dense foods, things that satisfy the palate and make you feel good, supporting you. But that doesn't mean your diet's going to be healthy because you don't eat bread. When people ask sometimes at a party and they're like, what do you do for a diet? It's like, oh, I don't eat bread, I don't eat red meat, I don't eat sugar. Okay, great. That doesn't tell me anything. I have no idea if your diet's healthy because of that. Your diet's not healthy because you don't eat certain foods. If you have that peanut allergy I mentioned earlier, then yeah, don't eat peanuts. But that doesn't mean your diet's automatically going to be healthy because you're not eating peanuts. You're just avoiding a potentially bad thing. But you have to do good things if you want good results. And that means eat to satisfy. Don't just restrict yourself. So by all means, impose restrictions if you feel it's necessary. Sometimes people do it for religious reasons or ethical reasons. Some people are like, I don't want to contribute to the torture of animals and things. It's like, great, fine, go for that. But don't base your diet on that. Heavens no, that's not even close to enough. That's so insufficient, especially if you want to build muscle and strength. You want to eat plenty of good food. You want to get protein at each meal if you can, good proteins. And you want to be eating enough so that you don't feel so restricted. If you're suffering from hunger and cravings and feeling like, oh man, I would kill for a cheeseburger right now or something, those are a sign of an inadequate diet. And I would bet you money it's probably holding you back in the gains department. It's what happened to me for many years. I had all those dietary approaches myself, And one of the best things I did to finally start really saying, oh, I'm starting to put on some muscle here, is I finally just started to eat like a regular normal person. I didn't have any restrictions. If I ordered a sandwich, like, yeah, mayo and cheese and yeah, sure, bread, whatever, great, go for it. And I would just eat, and I would eat plenty of food. I wouldn't stuff myself, but I'd eat plenty of food. If I was hungry at 9 o'clock at night for whatever reason, I'd go make a sandwich. I'd, make a reheat the Chinese food I had in the fridge or whatever. I wouldn't have any restrictions whatsoever on my diet. And that made a hell of a difference. So if you have a lot of those restrictions in the name of, quote, a healthy diet, maybe second guess those. As always, though, of course, I'm not a doctor or a dietitian. So if you have questions on things pertaining to healthiness, if you have a condition or something, consult your doctor or a real dietitian. I studied nutrition in college. That doesn't make me a dietitian by any stretch of the imagine. Got a couple questions here. Yolanda is asking, is that a real katana, a real sword? Yeah, it's a real sword. It's well, it's kind of hard to take down at the moment, but yeah, that was a trophy that I won at a Taekwondo tournament years ago. It's funny enough. It's a replica of the one Uma Thurman used in Kill Bill. The organizer of the tournament, I guess, was a Quentin Tarantino fan. So instead of trophies, they gave out those swords. And I have a tradition myself of whenever I win medals and trophies and things and anything, I usually give them to those friends and family who've supported me over the years. I just did a Taekwondo tournament today and got a gold medal, and I'm going to give it to, actually, I've been seeing a therapist lately, so I'm going to give it to her and be like, you've been helping me out here. Thank you very much. But that's one of the few trophies I was like, I kind of like this. I'm going to keep this one, actually, just because it's a neat little talking piece. Unfortunately, though, I haven't really maintained it very well. The blade is a little bit rusty. I should probably look into getting some sort of ointment or something on it to take the rust off. Dan Osek is coming in. Hey, Matt, isometrics with the iso chain and now the iso max. Yes, is the cornerstone of my training. Nice. Same here. I just saw your article, Train Your Chain. It is a must read. Your PTR pillars fit perfectly with isometrics. Absolutely, my friends. Remember, when we have a fundamental approach to training, which chain training is based off of, it works with anything. Kettlebells, body weight training, bands. This is why I always tell people, like, don't get too hung up on the methods that you're using. People get so crazy about what's the best way to build muscle. And then people start recommending methods. You got to use free weights. You got to use machines. You got to do isometrics or body weight. Honestly, it really isn't that important, folks. I've built muscle with everything. Free weights, machines, cables, bands, body weights, isometrics. All of it works as long as you can just get some progressive tension in the muscles. If you can make a muscle work progressively harder with a method, that method is as good as it's going to get. That's all you can get from it. So then it just boils purely down to, well, what do you like? What method do you like? If you came to me and you're like, I hate bodyweight training. Calisthenics is terrible. I can't stand doing it. I'm like, don't do it then. I mean, look at all these books I've written about bodyweight training. I love bodyweight training. But honestly, if you hate doing push-ups, like, fine. There's no good reason to do them. All we need is the muscle tension. We just need to work the muscles progressively harder. And if you like doing it with isometrics or bands or whatever like that, great. Because honestly, the method really is not that important, folks. It really isn't. All right. Let's get a couple more, and then I'll continue with the topic of this week, which is all about how are you leaving gains on the table. Gatsu, it's good to see as always, my friend. Hey, Matt, been doing bodyweight calisthenics, bodybuilding style push-pull legs with a bit of skills, now doing front lever and 90 degrees hold. Very good. Since August, body recamp is nice and slow. Going to do this a year and then switch focus. Fantastic. Yeah, the front lever is one of the few things, because I'm not a skills guy. It never really interested me too much, but boy, that front lever, that is a great way to work the lats. Oh, that is a good way to put some size on your back because it hits the lats so directly. Although lately I've been doing a lot more dynamic levers, or I'm not exactly sure what this is called, but basically you're hanging and you just flip yourself up like into a lever with your knees bent if you need to regress it or something. But whoa, does that work the lats? Very, very effective way to hit the lats. It's fantastic way to get the back working. It's one of those things that I think needs to be brought into. And I keep saying this, I need to make a video on it because it's such a great exercise. Gregorius saying, my therapist said that if I wanted to start doing push-ups, I should stay at each level at least a week, and I added more weeks on each level, but this is very dogmatic. The body doesn't understand weeks. Body doesn't understand weeks. So always recognize the principle behind the advice, my friends. So this is a similar thing to like Paul Wade talks about in convict conditioning, where he's like, start on level 1 and stay there for a while. And then people ask me and they, I guess, write into him and they're like, what? I don't need to do push-ups on the wall. Like, I feel like I can do this forever. I feel like I'm holding myself back, in which Paul Wade just smacks his head and it's like, then make it harder, people. Let's go. You know, if you want it to be easier, if you want it to be easier to build muscle, you've got to make the exercise challenging. And he addresses that in his book, CMAS. A lot of people have asked me, it's like, doesn't he contradict what he says in convict conditioning with what he says in CMAS? Because he says convict conditioning, start on level 1, stay there. CMAS, he's like, make it as hard as you need it to. No, he says the same thing in both cases, because the principle of it is don't rush progression, okay? Milk what you can out of your exercises. Don't rush forward. But at the same time, yeah, if you're ready to move forward, move forward. Don't hold yourself back. The principle behind the message is always the same. And I suspect your therapist is doing the same thing, is don't rush, especially I'm assuming this is a physical therapist, because physical therapists are often dealing with a different set of circumstances. People are healing their body, who are regaining their abilities and stuff. And that's usually a much slower process than a lot of people may realize. So, all right. Number 3, reasons why you're leaving gains on the table. We covered dirty programming, covered restrictive dieting, or excessively restrictive dieting, I should say. Number 3 is no workout log or focus on progression. And this often goes hand in hand with the hustle culture that is very persuasive or pervasive in our fitness culture, where it's like, I'm just going to destroy myself in the gym. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to be so sore I can barely walk, and I'm going to crawl out of the gym, and I'm going to work for, hours on the leg press, and I'm just going to destroy myself, and it's awesome. Okay, great. Yeah, satisfying. I know. I love that stuff too. But is it better than what you did before? Because fundamentally, all your muscles know is how much work are you asking them to do? And is that workload or that demand increasing over time? Okay. You have to have that. You have to have progression. The thing is, hard work is very satisfying, but it's no guarantee of progression. You can work your tail off for months, hell, even years. I've done it. I know lots of people have done it. I'm working so hard. Great. Is it better than it was last week? Are you leveled up from where you were 2 weeks ago? The answer had better well be damn yes. It better be sure, and you'd better know. It shouldn't be, yeah, I feel a little stronger, I guess, is kind of, I think, no, it should be obvious. It should be you should grab onto that pull-up bar, pull yourself up and be like, whoa, oh, that got better. You should feel like, wow, okay, that lat, those lats are really lighting up right now. Like the lever exercise we were just talking about. The other day, I was demonstrating it to a client, and I just right on out into a lever. And one of my fellow coaches was there. He's like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And I was like, I didn't know I could do that either. Power of isometrics, I guess. But nonetheless, it should be something that's fairly obvious to a decent timeline. We don't want to be too much focused on, I'm just going to work my tail off and cross my fingers and hope it just ends up well. That doesn't work in our favor much. You're leaving your results up to chance. Not to mention, you're making your objective of your workouts to work as hard as possible. We don't want to do that. We don't want to work as hard as possible. That's just going to make it harder to be effective in our workouts. Excuse me, I spilled my tea here. We want to make it easier. Anything that makes stuff easier in life is better. I need to do a podcast on this. I might have done it a year or two ago, but That's what I said in the introduction for these podcasts. The whole point of Red Delta Project is to make fitness easier, because easier is always better. If you can make it easier to do what you need to do, you're going to get better results every single time. And you're also going to be able to maintain those results a hell of a lot better. And anything that makes it more difficult and harder to do those things is only going to hold you back. And when we have a focus on hard work, that's the hard way to go about it, my friends. But if you have a focus on progression, I'm trying to do these pull-ups better. I'm trying to level up what my muscles can do. That makes things way easier. And the best way to do that, keeping a workout log. Check out down below the quick read that I created on the scoreboard progression log. It's the easiest workout log you can possibly keep. You could do it on a whiteboard, a single sheet of paper. I like to use Google Docs for it. Really easy way to track your workouts. Super easy, because you don't have to fill out little boxes. You don't have to write things down after every single rep and set and everything like that. It's a heck of a lot easier for tracking your workouts. Easier to track your workouts makes it easier to know what you need to do for progression. Easier to know what you do for progression makes it easier to make that progression. And anything that makes it easier to make progression is definitely going to make it easier to build and maintain more muscle and strength. It's that simple. Stay focused on that progression, my friends. It's the way to go. Wish I knew that years ago. Oh boy. Get to some more questions here. Krista Boy is saying, hey, Matt, what is your opinion on hybrid calisthenics? I think it's Danny Cavadlo's book is what I'm assuming you're talking about. I had an interview with Danny when the book came out. You can find it on the RDP YouTube channel. If you just search my channel, you'll probably find it. Just Danny Cavadlo. Search on my channel, you'll find it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan at all of combining any particular, misspoke there. Erase the past 10 seconds from your memory, please. I'm not a fan of using any singular method for fitness. Okay, so a lot of times people would be like, but you're all about bodyweight training. Yeah, I'm also about isometrics, and I'm a martial artist, and I'm a mountain biker, and I'll swing the occasional kettlebell. The fact of the matter is, we have to remember that this whole fitness thing is completely open source. We can bring in whatever we want into our fitness strategy, and we can also exclude whatever doesn't serve us. So that's why I always encourage people, do whatever you feel is best for you, whatever serves you. Even with Danny's book, Hybrid Calisthenics, he's talking about basic free weight techniques with bodyweight training. Good combination, fantastic. Deadlifts, bench press, bent over rows, pull-ups, these sorts of things. Bodybuilding moves, the things you want to focus on for building muscle. But the thing is to really ask is, does that move serve you? Is that in your wheelhouse? Or are you better off doing other things? Like I've got calisthenics and I've also got isometrics. That serves me better. When I was getting into calisthenics, I did a month of just pure bodyweight training. And then I started to incorporate the free weight stuff back in. And after a few weeks of that, I was like, why am I doing this free weight stuff? Because fundamentally, I didn't feel like it was any different. It's like 3 sets of 10 heavy weighted push-ups, 3 sets of 10 on the bench press. My body's doing the same thing. Why am I doing 2 things that do the same thing? This doesn't make any sense to me. And I'd rather just do the body weight thing. So for that, it was just a matter of, well, I'd rather do one rather than the other, just out of preference, purely preference. And they both do basically the same thing. So for the way I'm using them, so why would I do both when I can get it with just one? But you could be on the other side of the spectrum. You could be looking at it like, yeah, but I do like Olympic lifting and isometrics because they're different enough that the Olympic lifting serves me well as a football player or something. I don't know. Great. If it serves you, add it in. Add in anything you want into your fitness program, my friends. If it serves you, add it in. Don't be dogmatic and, it's like, well, I'm a power lifter. That means bench, squat, and deadlift is almost entirely what I do. And, power lifters, they're not doing handstands. So it's not in the handstand, box or ethos or whatever. I'm like, so what? It doesn't matter. No one cares if you're part of this clique, if you will. And again, going back to dieting, when people are like, oh, well, I'm vegan, so I can't have anything, with animal products and something. But boy, I don't know. I just for some reason feel like I'm better if I have fish in my diet. Well, then add fish into your diet. Well, I'm not going to be vegan then. So what? Who cares? So you don't have a label. You know what they put labels on? Products. They put labels on coffee mugs. They put labels on computers and t-shirts and jeans and sports cars. Are you a product, my friend? Do you want to be a product? Do you want to be a product of an ideology or a corporation? I sure as hell don't. No, I'm going to make up a t-shirt. I am not a product, right? I am not something you can slap a label on. And whenever we feel like we have to abide by a label, then we become a product and we're not living our true path that we need to do of what's best for you, for your diet, your exercise program. I got my grind style calisthenics program. And I get people asking me all the time, but I want to add in deadlifts. Great, go for it. Or some people would even say, but I don't like weighted calisthenics. That's part of grind style. If I don't do that, is that grind style? Sure, whatever. Screw grind style calisthenics. Don't even do the program. Just do whatever. It's just kind of a structured format. It's a template to work with. Every diet and workout program is just a template. Change it however you want, because ultimately this stuff is about serving you. And if it serves you better, it's better. Bottom line. And that's another way you could be leaving gains on the table. If you're like, I only train, as our paleo ancestors did. So I'm only doing running through the woods and pull-ups on tree limbs and stuff. And I'm like, here's a set of dumbbells. I'm like, I can't use those dumbbells. Like, ugh. Even though there's a part of you that goes, oh man, I would really love to do some chest flies on that dumbbell bent, on that dumbbell press. It's like, then do it. Who cares if you don't abide by a damn label? You're just limiting yourself. There's no advantage to that. I need to make a video on that too. Math coming on. I hope you could help me with my math. God, I was always terrible at math in school. When I push my shoulders down, it contracts my lower lats, as it should. If I will do it during back exercises, pull-ups, rows, will it help me to target the lower lats? Undoubtedly. Yes, absolutely. Although your whole lats, don't think lower lats, think all of your lats. Think the whole thing. That's the whole idea behind chain training, is we don't want to feel like this little area is working and that area is working. Whenever we usually feel like this area is working, that usually doesn't mean that area is working more. It usually means the other areas aren't working nearly enough. You're not turning that on more. You're turning off the other areas. So you want everything working. So that's the beauty of chain training. When you're doing pull-ups and rows, especially those compound movements, you should feel your entire back working all the time, okay? Doesn't matter the technique, doesn't matter what type of hand position you have. You may have a bit of emphasis, maybe, from one exercise to the other. Like I feel a little more in my biceps here, a little more in my upper back with this one. That's fine. But with everything you're doing that's pulling, the entire back, full on. The more you can get involved, the better it's going to be. And the easier it's going to be to build those muscles. So that's another way you could be losing out on gains, is trying to create too much isolation. Even with single joint stuff. I did a video not too long ago about single joint or quote isolation body weight training using like suspension straps and stuff. And I was very clear at the beginning of the video. It's like, it's really not isolation. It's emphasis in a thing. So if you're doing bicep curls on suspension straps, you should still have your entire back working. There's more work being done on the biceps, sure, but the entire pull chain should still be working to a very high degree. Otherwise, you're losing stability, you're losing control like your lats, and you want to have everything working at all times. But it's a good thing that you're feeling those muscles, because sometimes we'll change something. We're like, oh, lower lats or lower traps. Oh, okay, good. Now you're aware of what that's like. Now use it all the time. Don't think, oh, now I feel it in my lower lats when I do the exercise this way. No, have it all the time. All right, I'm beating that dead horse. Let's move on here, my friends. So this one is number 4, reasons why you're leaving gains on the table. And we've covered dirty programming, and it's not focused, too much restriction in your diet, no focus on progression or keeping a workout log. Check out the scoreboard progression log down below. And the 4th one kind of goes along with the first one. I touched on it a little bit, but too much focus on fancy skill-based exercises. Because remember, when we're working with our exercises, we have a number of ingredients within our functional capability. So if I do like a single leg squat, I have the strength in my leg muscles performing that exercise. I also have stability. I have mobility. I have coordination. I have cardiovascular stamina. I have all these other variables that also are integrated into the ability to do the exercise. Now, when we're trying to build muscle and create a stimulus for hypertrophy, you want to use programming, but also exercises where the muscular work capacity is the limiting factor. The stability, the mobility, your cardiovascular, all that other stuff, that's still getting used, but it shouldn't be the limiting factor. If your workout program or you're using exercises where you're like, well, I was doing pistol squats, but I lost my balance. Or I was doing front levers, for example, but just I can't coordinate the tension throughout my back and I'm too out of breath from running the mile on the treadmill just before or whatever. All you're doing is compromising your ability to challenge your muscular work capacity with those things because you're working the other things. You're challenging the other things. That's why in grind style calisthenics, we use a lot of upper body support for progressive techniques like pistol squats, shrimp squats, and so on. Can you do it without that upper body support? Absolutely. But are you going to be able to challenge your muscular work capacity of your legs without it, as much without it? I doubt it. You could be a pistol squat master and be pretty good at it, but I would say most people are better off not having quite as much of a stability challenge because you want much more of a muscular work capacity challenge. So the fancy stuff, the neat stuff, the crazy stuff, that's good to play with. Absolutely. I'm not saying get rid of it. But if you were like, okay, building muscle, here we go, time to create a stimulus. You want really basic, simple, technically easy, quote, boring exercises. It's one of the reasons why I love overcoming isometrics. It's about as technically boring as you can get. That's why I don't post a lot on social media and stuff. It looks boring. It doesn't get a lot of likes on social media. It doesn't look very challenging. And that's because it's only entirely about building up that muscular work capacity, which makes it one of the easiest ways to build muscle and strength. But that's what you want to do is make the exercises, basically, I would say technically easy as possible. So you can push it as hard as you physically can. If you're struggling to get dips on rings because you're kind of struggling with the stability and stuff, go with dips on solid bars if you can, or just regular push-ups or something. You don't want it to be a technical challenge. You want it to be a muscular challenge. More questions here said, coming on. Hey, Matt, the month of Ramadan is almost here. So do you have any thoughts on how to exercise while This is one I've addressed in a couple of times. The basic way is you're probably going to be behind the 8 ball during Ramadan as far as your energy level goes. So this is, as I was talking about, having very restrictive diets going to probably hold you back. You're probably going to be held back during Ramadan just because you're fasting until, I believe it's sundown or sunset. And so one, try to get good food and eat well when you can, during nighttime and stuff, but it can be harder to do so. That's why fasting makes it great for losing weight. It's just harder to eat more food. But you may have to just kind of curtail your workouts down a little bit. If you're feeling like you have what I call a low ceiling, where you're like, okay, push-ups, here we go. And after 2 sets, you're burned out. Well, okay, then you get 2 good hard sets. Don't worry too much about volume because that's usually what gets people when they've got some sort of a restriction like that. So if you notice, okay, if I do dips, I'm usually good for 3, 4, maybe 5 sets, but boy, during Ramadan, 3 sets is, a real killer. Well, then get 2 good hard sets and still focus on making that progression during that 2 hard sets. Don't worry too much about going to your normal workout if the dietary restrictions during Ramadan are not just supporting that workout. Bring it down a little bit and make progress where you can. Maybe you would even say, okay, I'm going to work on improving technique. Finally getting my chest to the bar during pull-ups, getting deeper into my squats, whatever the case may be. You can progress several different ways that don't exactly tax the body too much. But that's, again, only if you're noticing that sort of thing bringing about from the restriction of the fasting during Ramadan. If you're still ready to rock and roll and kick butt in your workouts, then keep going. Don't worry too much about it. And it may be something that kind of builds up over time too. For the first few days of Ramadan, you'd be like, I'm great, I'm good, I don't know, I'm fine, my workouts are fine. But I've experienced people who've practiced that in the gym, And as Ramadan continues, you see their energy and performance level decreasing throughout the festival. So it's something to just kind of be aware of over time. That may be something to look at and adjust accordingly, because it's a relatively short period too. Remember, building muscle is a marathon. If you really kind of hamper your workouts down and you're not feeling at your best during Ramadan, in the long run, it's not really going to do anything negative to you. So just don't beat yourself up over it. Don't exhaust yourself about it. Oh, here's a good one. Super Prime 117. Matt, how do you personally train for shock absorption? I love this question. That's fantastic. The muscles are the shock absorbers of the body, my friends. And they enact that shock absorption several ways. The first of which is coordination of allowing force to transfer through the body. That's why my chain training methods work well, because they're all about getting energy to transfer through our body. And a lot of times when we have stress, particularly in joints, it's because some muscles somewhere are not strong enough for doing their job. So instead of the force traveling through the body, it's going into sensitive areas like our joints, our knees, our elbows, our shoulders and stuff. A lot of times the areas that are not stable or strong for helping that happen are scapular position and movement, core strength with proper pelvic tilt, and hip stability. When I started to improve my hip strength with things like kettlebell swings and bridge work and more glute and hamstring activation, I was amazed at how if I was just running down the street to, catch the bus or something like that, it's like, oh my gosh, like my legs have so much less stress in them on every impact. It almost felt like running wasn't even a hard impact activity at all because my hips were so much stronger. So training for shock absorption is really about strength. It's about strength throughout the entire body, about allowing that force to transfer through the body. So big compound movements are where you're getting this sort of thing. And the telltale sign for a lot of folks is, again, on the isometrics sort of thing. I had a gentleman one time, he's always injured. This guy I used to train, he's always, oh, now my back hurts, now my shoulder hurts, now my elbows, now it's always something with him. And when I first got the iso chain, he was like, what's that? And I was telling him about it. He's like, oh, so he had the iso chain like this. And I was like, okay, and make like you're going to do a curl and you're going to hold it. And he's like, oh, okay. And he literally did this. His shoulder was way up. His arms are, and he's like, see, I'm curling the weight. I'm curling it. And it was like, holy mother of, like, no, dude, like this. And he, like this. And it was like, no, because when you apply a lot of force through the body, because that's what isometrics does, it's automatically making all the muscles work to a high degree, however they normally would when you're running or catching a baseball or something. So it's amplifying those imbalances. So we basically had to take him to a point where he's got a proper curl. And I was like, only apply enough force to hold that position. It was almost nothing. It's like 10 pounds. I was like, well, if you did this over time, it would get stronger and your ability to transfer force throughout your body would greatly increase. And I would bet money that a lot of his issues would probably disappear. But unfortunately, it was like, yeah, okay, that's a neat little toy. And he never did it again. So unfortunately, I think that was a opportunity squandered. Jeff Stockdale, it's good to see you again, as always, my friend. Hey, Matt, I'm doing kickboxing 5 times a week. Fantastic. And my leg training is lacking due to fatigue. Naturally, yeah. How can I best build muscle while trying to recover? That's going to be a challenge, my friend, because you've got a lot of kickboxing going on. And yes, that's going to require a lot of strength. So what I would do for you is I would have strength training just a couple times a week, 1 or 2 good hard sets each session. Not much. If you're looking for strength, it does not take much to build strength. Seriously, you don't need to destroy your legs in order to build strength. A lot of times we get strength and endurance mixed up. It's like, oh, I could do 1,000 squats. My legs are so strong. That's not strength, that's endurance. So what I would do if I were you is pick a couple of basic exercises that challenge the amount of tension that's in the muscle, because that's what strength really is. So things of low repetition amounts, or if you're doing isometrics, holding for no more than 10 seconds. Do it a couple of good hard sets, really putting a lot of tension in the muscle, and don't push it to a high degree of fatigue. That's going to keep you a lot easier to recover. Because remember, you don't need to recover from exercise. You only need to recover from fatigue. And Super Prime is saying again, can you get very sport specific with overcoming isometrics? Also, how do you train overcoming isos for the abs? I'm going to make a video tomorrow. I've been meaning to do this video forever. I need to do it again on basically a exercise library. I did this for my suspension straps that you can go in. There's timestamps down below, and you can just get a ton of my favorite exercises for every body part on suspension straps. I'll do the same thing for isometrics, particularly using the World Fit ISO trainer, which is one of the best ways to get started with it. And if you can do it on the ISO trainer, you could probably do it on like the ISO Max and the ISO Loop and other things as well. But yeah, there's lots of ways you can do it. Basically, think of cable machines that you do for your abs, like the ab crunches. So you have the ISO trainer on an overhead support, and then you just make like you're doing an isometric version of that exact exercise. That's one of my favorite ways to do it. I also have lots of ab exercises in my book, Overcoming Isometrics. Link is down below for that as well. But when we're talking sports specific, don't worry too much about sports specific. Think movement patterns that are sports specific. I attended a seminar one time of a gentleman who was a strength coach for the NFL. And he was very adamant about the fact of, if you have exercises that are a little too sports specific, it may actually compromise your performance because you're rewiring neural patterns that are just slightly outside of what you do in your sport. So it basically trains you to do your sport in a different way, which may not even be better. So he's talking like if you took a baseball and attached it to a cable machine and you're throwing a motion like you're a pitcher and you have resistance against a cable machine or a band, he's like, then you'd take these baseball players who've been doing that for a month and they couldn't throw with any decent accuracy because they've rewired their neural patterns to throw a baseball a different way. So instead, what you want to do is think of basic movement patterns that are involved in your sport. And a lot of times this is pretty easy stuff. Like squatting basically covers almost anything you would do with your legs. Running, jumping, kicking and stuff. Squats are very good for that sort of thing. Maybe if you're looking at kickboxing, we were talking about that earlier, holding an isometric side kick, where you're holding it out and just kind of holding your leg up, making that hip work really well. That can be a good way to go about it. Tennis and golf players, just any kind of rotation. Just kind of so you would have something anchored and you would just, isometric with a rotation aspect to it. That would be a good way. So think of what basic movement patterns you have involved in your sport. Train those. You don't need to necessarily train the exact type of movement that you would be doing, like swinging a golf club or throwing a baseball. It doesn't need to be that specific. And maybe in many ways, we could argue it shouldn't be that specific. All right, let's get to a last couple of things real quick here about gains you're leaving on the table. Number 5, poor tension control. I know I'm a broken record with this, and I know I'm a broken record with saying that too, because the bottom line is the entirety of your ability to effectively train and strengthen a muscle depends on your ability to put tension in it to begin with. If you have poor tension control in a muscle, say your lats, it's very common, there is nothing you will ever do that will ever work. No pull-ups, no rows, no lat pull-downs, nothing will ever build those lats to be the size and strength you want. Some things maybe work a little bit better, but nothing will work very well. It's that simple. But the bottom line is when you get good tension control, almost anything you do works. I know guys who've built huge legs running. I know guys who have built amazing backs just rock climbing, right? Things that aren't necessarily the best ways to challenge the work capacity of a muscle, and they build these muscles up like crazy because every time they're doing anything with that muscle, the brain is sending so much tension and such a strong signal to the muscle that it can't help but get developed. So poor tension control. You should feel the muscle working. And people say all the time, how do I know if the muscle's working? Well, if you're asking, it's not a good sign. You should really, really feel what's going on. If you're like, I think my lats are working, it should be like a baseball bat to the shins. Not a lot of doubt that it's happening. It should be very, very obvious. And if you have that poor tension control, isometrics is a great way to develop it. Sometimes using a relatively lightweight, but going with a fast motion. Bands are really good for this sort of thing. So if your lats are having trouble engaging, straight arm pull downs with exercise bands can be a really good way of developing that tension control as well. You're not trying to go with super heavy motions much of the time, because when we train heavy, we usually default to whatever neural patterns we normally have. And if that bypasses largely a key muscle group like your glutes or your lats or your shoulders or whatever, it's just going to go right around it. And only a little bit of trickle tension is going into it. So focus on the simple, relatively lightweight exercises that focus on that muscle to build up that tension, and incorporate it into your warm-ups as well for the next month or 6 months or so to get that muscle burned up. That's why the Isomax, came with one of these bands. So that way you can kind of get some light blood flow and feel the muscle working, saying, hey, traps or biceps or whatever, wake up, you guys got some work to do. And then when you go into the isometric, they're like, here we go, rather than, yeah, I think they're kind of there, right? Leaving gains on the table, my friends. Don't make it hard on yourself. All right, so a couple other questions. Krista Boy, again, this video I'll be making shortly. What are the best isometrics for each movement pattern? That's chain training. That will be covered in the video. Look for that. There's lots of them. Remember, best exercise is always subjective to the person. You could do one exercise for your abs and you're like, whoa, abs lit up. Holy smokes. Someone else could be like, I could barely feel it. But I got this other exercise. Wow, I really feel it there. It's like, okay, for you, it's that exercise. For you, it's this other exercise. Basically, when it comes to building muscle, whatever gets the muscle burning and really working, that you feel it the most, is going to be the best. That's the one you want to kind of be looking for. All right. And one last question. What is the best way to have a good and explosive high pull-up? Well, you got to get really, 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 really good at pull-ups to begin with. You've got to have good tension control in all of your pull chain, your grip, your biceps, the back of your shoulders, your entire back working at all times. A lot of people do not do enough regressive pull-ups, in my opinion, where your feet are on the ground or you've got your feet up on a box or something. Most people need to be doing a lot more of those, because if you have a slightly regressed level of resistance, it's a lot easier to train for power. It's a lot easier to train tension control, and it's a lot easier to practice how well you're doing the pull-up. If you're struggling with reps of 5, I'd say definitely make it a lot easier. And that way you can get what you want at a lower level of resistance, and then you just add the resistance over time. And finally, the last way that people are leaving gains on the table like crazy is simply lack of consistency, my friends. And I'm talking lack of consistency as far as I'm just not getting to the gym like I usually do. Sometimes it's once a week, sometimes it's 3 times a week. Sometimes it's not even in a week at all, and a week goes by and I don't get it. Or sometimes they're like, yeah, I'm hitting the gym regularly, but sometimes, I'm doing swimming, sometimes I'm doing racquetball, sometimes I'm lifting weights, sometimes, I'm trying to build up my biceps, I'm doing bicep curls, but after a couple of weeks, nah, not that. I'm going to do kettlebell swings. After a couple of weeks, nah. And this is a big one that plagues a lot of people who want results a hell of a lot faster. So they'll do something for literally like a few weeks or maybe even a couple of months, and they'll be like, yeah, that's not working at all. I'm going to ditch that, and I'm going to do this other crazy thing. We want to have very consistent stimulus in the body. Every time we go to the workout, our body should be relatively comfortable with what's coming down the pipe for it. That doesn't mean don't change things up. If you are doing nothing but squats and then one day you decide to do lunges and you're like, whoa, holy smokes, my legs. Well, listen to that. You're looking for a little bit of that stimulus of, oh, wow, muscles are really working here. But at the same time, don't be changing up just because you think it's not working. Don't be changing up so much just for the sake of variety. Building muscle is a relatively simple, boring process. It's nothing fancy. It's not something that uses a lot of crazy technical techniques and programming and stuff. It's relatively boring. We used to have pro-level bodybuilders come into the gym that I worked at here in Denver. Phil Heath came in once, the current Mr. America at the time. He had the most boring program in the world, incline dumbbell bench press for like an hour. That's all he did. I was like, dear, is he going to do anything else? And it wasn't anything fancy like, alternating or power or anything. I was like, no, he looked like anybody else who was working out there. But I bet you dollars to donuts, he's had that type of incline dumbbell bench press type of workout in his repertoire for the past 5 years. He's like, yep, here we go again. Same thing. Because remember, at the end of the day, we're trying to make our muscles really, really good at working really, really hard. That's what we're trying to do for building the muscle. And anything you're doing that is compromising that ability, you're leaving gains on the table. You're making it harder on yourself to build muscle. And it's not the way to go, my friends. It's not going to help you. So make it easy. Make it easy on yourself. And that way, you're going to be able to have a much easier time building the muscle, keeping the muscle, and you're going to have more fun doing it as well. Don't make it complicated. Don't make it difficult. You'll get more out of it later on. So thanks everybody very much for listening. I do sincerely appreciate it. Again, the books that I was referencing, as well as the rest of the others in the RDP library, like the Progressive Workout Log and Overcoming Isometrics, are all down below in the description. Check those out. Let me know if you have questions, reddeltaproject@gmail.com. And thank you very much for the support. I do sincerely appreciate it. I'll talk to you folks next week. We'll probably do more. Well, let me know. What do you think I should do? Hit me on the Instagram page, Red Delta Project Instagram page, if you want me to cover any topics in particular on this podcast, and I'll probably throw them in for you. But until then, I will talk to you and bid you adieu. Till then, be fit and live free.